Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you to the 8th lecture of the course Management, Organizational Policies and Practices. Let's have a recap of lecture 7 before we go to the lecture 8. In lecture 7 we started with the concept of organizational stakeholders. Organizational stakeholders, as I told you, there are two types of organizational stakeholders. One are the primary stakeholders and the other ones are the secondary stakeholders. So we had a discussion on the different primary stakeholders, such as the product market stakeholders, the organizational stakeholders, the capital market stakeholders, and we discussed the secondary stakeholders, under which we discussed the general public and the environmental factors, environmental laws, etc. So we also discussed that how these different stakeholders, they affect the organization, how they, what is their relative role in the functioning of the organization, how they have rights in the organization, and how they can affect the smooth functioning of the organization. So every stakeholder has its own different unique expectations which the organization is supposed to fill up, and the organization can fill up the demands of these various stakeholders only when it is gaining or it is having above average returns. If it is not running into profits or if it is running into losses, it will be difficult for the organization to meet the expectations of all these different stakeholders. And the strategic objective of the organization with respect to stakeholders is how it has to meet the short-term and long-term expectations of the different stakeholders and how it has to achieve a balance between them. Then we had a discussion on the concept of social responsibility, then whom the organization is actually responsible to. Is it responsible to the shareholders only, or it is also responsible to the stakeholders? So we discussed the two models with respect to social responsibility. One is the shareholder model, which was given by Friedman, and as per that model, the organization is not responsible towards the society, because if it starts investing some of the money towards the towards the causes of the society or towards the betterment of the community or the improvement of the community, then it's going to lose that value on the products and services it is giving to the market. Maybe then it's not able to produce that quality outputs, or it's not going to produce that quality service which is required in the market, and then the customers, that much value will not be created, and the customers will suffer. Overall, shareholders will suffer because the market share of the company will reduce, and as a result the stock price will reduce and shareholder value will reduce, and the organization won't be able to give that much dividends to its shareholders as it was giving before. So as a result, the overall output in the economy will decline. On the other hand, the stakeholder model says that it's all the different stakeholders towards the organization is socially responsible to, and it has to act in ways that are socially responsible and environmentally justifiable. So even this model says that even if the organizations, there is no linkage between social responsibility and the performance of the organization, even then the organizations should spend on the societal causes or on the societal needs, because they should feel that they are ethically responsible or morally responsible towards the general public or towards other environmental facets as well. Then we discussed the concept of cost and benefits of planning. So we discussed that how what are the different costs or what are the different pitfalls associated with planning, in a way that when we plan, sometimes the plans are not that flexible and they're not that adaptable to change. As a result, they can lead the company to co-rigidities, which and it can lead the company to strategic drift, which means that the company can fall behind its own objectives, and it can fall behind the external environmental requirements. So the benefits of planning, there we discussed a number of benefits of the planning, such as it gives more direction, and it gives more intensity of effort to those who have planned the activity, and it provides better results overall. We also discussed that how the plans are formulated at the top level, the medium level, and the bottom level. And we started off with the concept of vision and mission statement that have been formulated at the top level. And based on those vision and mission statement, the company strategically plans its objectives and its targets. And then the medium level, the middle level managers, they are then responsible for realization for proper implementation of those plans that have been formulated at the top level. So the strategy that the middle level managers then normally use is that management by objectives, wherein they call meetings with all the employees in the organization, and they mutually set the targets and their goals and their objectives, and then they keep a quarterly or regular follow-ups on those bases and provide the feedback to the employees as per their performance and the standards that they were that were set for them for their performance. Then we saw that how at the bottom level, the first line managers, they are responsible for implementation and enactment of the plans that have been formulated at the top level. Here we discussed the concept of the standalone plans, and we also discussed the concept of the organizational policies, the procedures, the rules and laws, or the different regulations, right? We also discussed the concept of special purpose plans, which are basically in cases of change that occurs in the external environment. So that is the planning for change. And then we discussed how the organization should make special purpose plans in face of contingencies and for product development processes. We discussed all these concepts in greater detail in our lecture 7. So for now, for this lecture 8, we are going to discuss the organizational decision making, how decisions are made at the managerial level in the organization, what are the different guidelines to make effective decisions, etc. So let's see in detail what are the different outcome expectations that you can have from today's lecture. After having a discussion of this lecture, you should be able to explain the limits and the steps and the limits to rational decision making. You should also be able to explain the different mistakes that managers make while making the decisions. You should be able to explain how managers' decision making can be improved. And lastly, you should be able to explain how group decisions and group decision making techniques can improve decision making. So let's have a detailed look on all these different sections. We start with what is rational decision making. Decision making itself, first, decision making is the process of choosing a solution from available alternatives. So you have a number of different options and you have to choose one option. How you will be deciding that which option you have to choose. That is decision making. Right? And then we have the rational decision making, which is a systematic process of defining problems, evaluating alternatives, and choosing optimal solutions. So rational decision making is basically a rational and a more systematic process, or this is the process with which or how actually the decisions, or rationally the decisions, should take place. From a rational decision maker, we expect that he will follow a systematic process of, first of all, he will identify and define the problem, then he will evaluate the different, or choose different alternatives and evaluate those alternatives, and then he will make his optimal decision, or he will choose an optimal solution towards that problem. Okay, then so it leads us to the different number of steps towards rational decision making, the definition that we just discussed. So out of that definition, we can see that the first step towards rational decision making is the manager should be able to, or he should define the problem. Then he should be able to identify the decision criteria. 3, he should be able to weight that criteria, or that criteria should be weighed. And then 4th, the possible alternative lines of actions should be generated. Then those different alternative criteria or lines of actions or courses of actions, they should be evaluated against the criteria, and then lastly compute the optimal decision, right? So it starts from the definition of the problem and it ends to the computation of the optimal decision making, that how the optimal decision is arrived at. Okay, so the first step towards rational decision making is definition of the problem. A problem exists when there is a gap between a desired state and an existing state, right? So there is a problem when you are, for example, not reaching your desired outcomes. You have set some performance standards that you want to achieve $200 of sales every month, but you are actually having achieved a sales of only 150 per month. So there is a gap of 50. So that is a problem, right? There can be a number of areas where, of course, the problems can arise. That can be in the processes of the organization. The machinery is not functioning well. That is why you're not being able to produce as much output as as is desirable, or that was your target, right? There can be certain problems in the employee behaviors or in the employee attitudes that is not leading you to the fulfillment of your objectives or of your targets, right? Then there can be certain problems in the external market which are beyond your control, because of which you're falling short of your targets, right? So there can be a number of reasons why you are there is a gap between what your expectations were and what you have actually done, or what you have actually achieved, right? So when the managers have to make certain decisions, of course, then there is a problem towards which you have to make a decision, right? And the managers, they should, first step towards making that rational decision is that you need to identify the gap, right? That there exists a gap. So sometimes a gap is existing, but the managers or you are not aware of that gap, right? It's really important that first you identify that gap, and timely identification of the gap is also very important, right? And that timely identification of the gap is only possible when the manager is having a evaluation, when the evaluation mechanism is strong in the organization. Okay. About the evaluations we'll be discussing in our next lectures. So for now we see that one, the manager should be aware of the gap, then he should be motivated to reduce that gap, he should have the knowledge, skills and abilities to fix that gap, and he should also have the resources to fix that gap. So first you identify what the gap is, and then you move to the next step, that is you should also have the motivation to reduce that gap. So we discuss all these steps one by one. First, how you define the problem or how you identify the problem. I have one or two examples for you on real company cases, real life company cases. First example is about the Cisco systems, which makes the switches and routers that create the infrastructure for internet. So Cisco wants to make a broader impact on internet communication, especially in the business world. The company will stretch its resources to develop instant messaging and web conferencing as well as online video. So here we have identified the problem, defined the problem. Cisco has identified the problem, which is that it wants to broaden its impact on internet communication. So first it has identified the gap, and then in the next step it has seen that what it will do to hit that gap, right? Then we have the about problem identification. We have another very interesting example, which is from Campbell Music, which had to close its 30 of 36 stores. Why it had to do that? Because this company was basically, it was a small company in America, and it was selling the different CDs, and it was into the CD business. It was selling the CDs, right, to the customers. So what happened was that the company was selling the CDs at per CD was costing around $10.72 to the customer, while the price of these CDs from the external competitors, from the other competitors of this company, such as Walmart, that was $10, right? So it was Walmart and other retailer that was offering the same CD at $10, which were direct competitors of this Campbell Music. Now Campbell Music is only dealing in CDs, while Walmart, you know, it is one of the biggest retailing chains, and it offers a number of other products as well other than CDs, right? And same goes for the other retailer store. So they were selling it at $10, and this company was selling it at 10.72, and the company saw that it was more and more, it was quickly the market share of this company was declining, and it was difficult for the company to keep profitable. So in the face of this event, it had to close down its 30 stores out of a total of 36 stores. Right? What was the problem? Of course, the problem was that it was offering the product at a higher price than the competitors, right? But was it aware of the problem or not? When we discuss the other few steps in the problem definition, then we again get back to this case. Now here I discuss with you another case of a food dog company. When this company, it saw that, or when the owners of the company, they saw that there is a huge, people are really increasingly fond of pets, and they're keeping pets increasingly. This company opened this store, which was a very expensive store and a high quality store where the dog food was available. So in they offered the food in various packings, such as in cans and in the packets, and those cans and packets, they were labeled beautifully in golden and red colors, and all the nutrient information and all the ingredients information was written in detail on those cans and on those packets. Right, so but the company still was unable to attain its sufficient profit base to keep it in business, and it really had to wind up its business. So the company could not identify what was the reasons that it could not still compete with its competitors. So here again we'll get back to this problem later. Then we also have an example from the business people who complained of unreasonable working conditions, and the Congress responded to the unfavorable working conditions from people, which were that they were working 60 hours per week as opposed to the 40 hours per week, which is the normal average, or which is the normal standard around the companies, and which was their company requirement as well. But they were working 60 hours per week and they were not paid for that overtime. So what was the Congress? So those people's demand was that they should be paid for that overtime work. Right, so Congress, because it could not, did not have that much deep pockets to pay those employees who were working overtime, it did not have that much pockets to pay them for that overtime. So what it did was that it asked the people, it had applied this policy of strictly prohibiting the people from doing their work during the lunch breaks or sitting late after 6 o'clock. It used to turn off the lights in the office after those hours, and they used to turn off all the office equipment and the machinery and etc., so that the people cannot sit longer and they cannot sit late. So this is how this company basically, it identified the problem and it saw that how it has to solve that problem. It knew that it does not have enough resources to meet the requirement, to pay for the overtime work. So it basically strictly stopped the employees from working overtime and only restrict to that for 40 hours of work per week. Let's go to the step 2 in which is the rational decision criteria. Okay, before moving to this step, we have a little discussion left on these 2-3 company cases. The Campbell Music, who had to close its 30 out of 36 stores. So I wonder if you could come up with a solution as to why this company had to close these 30 out of 36 stores. Of course, yes, their product was expensive compared to its competitors. That is why they could not attract that much number of customers. But then did the company owners did not know that it's running out of business because of this, that its product is expensive and it needs to lower its product price? Of course, it's very easy for the company owners or for anyone to identify that why the profits are lower, or why it is not able to attract its customers. In this case, it's very simple, right? So it means that they knew what the problem is, the company owners, right? And of course, they would definitely be having the motivation as well to solve this problem or to reduce this gap, right? as the second step in the problem definition or identification or towards the solution of the problem or towards rational decision making, that we did was that people, the managers, they should need to identify the problem, and two, they also need to have the motivation. So in this case, we expect that the company owners had the motivation, because of course no one wants to turn off its 30 stores out of 36 stores, right? Of course, they were there for business and they wanted to do the business, right? So we also expect that they had the motivation to solve this problem. But the third factor that we studied towards rational decision making was that they should also have the knowledge, skills and abilities and the resources to solve the problem. So here in this case, what we expect is that since they were a small company, they maybe did not have that much resources to reduce the price of their product and bring it equal to that of their competitors, that is $10, or they could not because the competitors such as Walmart, they have thousands of stores operating, and there are hundreds of products that they offer in those stores. So they could, it could be that they could be getting the CDs from the CD providers or from the recording company. They might be getting those CDs at a lower price in bulk than they could be getting them from then the Campbell Music could be getting. And it is also possible that they were getting the CDs at the same price as Campbell Music was getting, but they could subsidize their CDs and keep the costs from the other products, right? And they could do that because they had a number of products, so they could easily subsidize their CDs to attract and to lure a number of customers towards their outlets. So here this company apparently could not stay into business because it could not, it did not have enough resources to address the problem. Then we have this case of expensive dog food company, which basically could not stay in business. And here in this case, when the competitors of this company, they were asked that why this company could not stay into business, they told that it was very simple. They could not stay into business because in their packaging, on the cans and on the different packets that they were offering for food, dog food, they did not contain the picture of the dog on it, right? So that was very simple. So but this company, it could not identify what the problem was, right? And it led it towards running out of business. Okay, so after problem definition, we have the second stage in towards rational decision making, which is the identification of the decision criteria. So here the standards, decision criteria is basically the standards that are used to guide judgments and decisions. So you set certain standards and they provide you as a guide towards how you have to make your judgments and how you have to do your decisions. The more criteria a potential solution, of course, the more criteria your alternative or your potential solution meets, the more decision criteria it meets, the better that solution is expected to be. So let's have an example here. If you have to purchase a computer for your office, right? And you, for making your decision, you should set a certain criteria, a certain decision criteria, that against what criteria I have to make my decision out of the different options that are available to you. You have a certain criteria in mind. Whenever you go to shopping, even if you have to purchase your clothes, you have a certain criteria in your mind that if I want to buy a shirt, it should be a shirt, half sleeve shirt, it should be a full sleeve shirt, right? It should be a front open shirt, or it should be a shirt with with button closing, it should be a shirt with a zipper, etc. So you have a certain criteria, a certain decision criteria, and on the basis of that criteria, you take further steps. You search for alternatives, options, and etc. So here again, if you have to buy a computer or buy the computers for your office staff, what would be your decision criteria? It would be reliability, on-site service, warranty. It would be compatibility with the existing software. It would be technical details of the computers, such as their computer chip, the several gigabytes of memory and hard drive, then CD-ROM to play DVDs, and of course a good price. So these are the different decision criteria that you are expected to have when you are going to buy a computer for your office use. Then the next step is that you need to weight the criteria. You need to see that, okay, you have to how certain criteria are more important for you than certain other criteria. There are certain criteria which you just cannot ignore, or which you just cannot underestimate. They are most important, right? So you, in terms of the importance of the criteria, in terms of the weightage of the criteria, you weigh them. You assign weights to all the different criteria. For example, for when you have to buy this computer for office use, you can see that you do not need computers with 17-inch monitor, right? Even 15-inch monitor, that should be enough. And you don't need to have a CD-ROM drive for office use, because in the Pentium 400 computer chip is more important, and 128 megabytes of memory, that might be more sufficient. Network internet connections, at least 10 gigabytes hard drive, they are whatever their capacity is. You will what we want to say here is that the requirements of memory, the requirements of the internet and network connections, and the requirements of your computer chip, they might be more important than other factors such as its 17-inch screen or a 15-inch monitor, right? And similarly, CD-ROM drive may not be as important, because you might be having this networked computer and shared computers, and so it's not important to have a CD-ROM on every desk, drive in the computer on every desk, right? And there are certain other factors which might be more important when it is coming to the buying of computer for office use. And you should also have this mind that here in this case, when I'm giving you this example, I'm giving you from perspective of the manager. The manager has to make this decision of buying the computer for its staff, and it has to buy a number of computers for its staff. So what are the different steps in rational decision making? We are into that discussion, and we have just seen that after you have set your decision criteria, you need to weigh your decision criteria, and there are two methods how you can weigh your decision criteria. One is the absolute method, and the other one is the relative method. In absolute method, what you do is that you absolutely compare each criteria on its own. So you see the merits and demerits of only each criteria independently of the other criteria. You are absolutely judging one criteria, or putting the merits or putting the weights of each one criteria each. In the relative comparisons, what you're doing is that you're comparing each criteria to the other criteria. So you arrive at a bivariate analysis, where you are comparing, if you have 10 criteria, you are comparing every criteria with the other criteria in this relative comparisons, and then you are weighing that criteria. So each criteria is weighed against all the other criteria. Here in the absolute comparisons, they are assessed individually, and then they are weighed individually, irrespective of the comparisons. No comparisons are made. So here we have an example of how you absolute weighing of decision criteria, where these criteria, they are weighed on a Likert scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is critically important and 1 is completely unimportant. So we have 9 decision criteria here in this example, starting with the predictive reliability. Then we have owner satisfaction, predicted depreciation, avoiding accidents, fuel economy, crash protection, acceleration, ride, and front seat comfort. As you can see that these criteria are when you have to buy a car. So for that we have these number of criteria that you would be seeing, and out of that, if we see how these criteria have been numbered in terms of their importance, 5 has been attached to predictive reliability, so it has been considered most important. Then the fuel economy is also getting 5, that is also most important, and then front seat comfort is also very important. So we can see from numbering of these criteria that how some of the criteria out of these in making your decisions, they are more important. So when you'll be choosing different alternatives, these items, these decision criteria would be more important for you, against which you'll be seeing your options. And then the second one which we option that or the way which we discussed to weigh our criteria was the relative weighing of the decision criteria, or the comparison method in which you are comparing the two different criteria. Here you see that how each criteria has been weighed against the other criteria, and then how the total weight of each is arrived at, right? Then we have the next step, which is towards the rational decision making, which is the generate alternative courses of action. Till now you have generated your decision criteria, and you have also weighed your decision criteria, and now you will be generating a number of different alternatives, or the different courses of actions that you have, or different alternative options, amongst which you have to choose one, or amongst which you have to decide one. Right. So for example, if we have there is a manufacturing company is operating in Los Angeles, right, and it wants to relocate because the local environment is not that conducive, the government laws or government regulations, they are not supportive for business in that city, and also because there can be a number of other reasons. Maybe your factory or you're doing business that is not very much close to the place of raw materials, and the inbound logistics, they're really costly for you, and there can be a number of other reasons associated with doing your business in that city. So that is why you want to move to some other place for doing your business, where the government regulations are a little relaxed, and the environment is more conducive for doing business, and it's easier for the investors to come in. It is easier for the suppliers, and for you suppliers to reach you, and your places closer to the raw materials, etc. And other labor costs are also cheaper, or better quality labor is available. So there can be a number of reasons because of which you want to move out of that city. So now you have to make a decision. You have to search for the alternatives that are available to you. Right. So what you do is that on the basis of these different decision criteria, such as you want to have want to go to a place where the cheap labor is available for cheap, where is the quality labor available, raw material is available for cheap, rental prices are lower, right, and government regulations are relaxed. So these are all the different criteria decision criteria that you define, and on the basis of these decision criteria you generate a number of options that will be moving for these 7 or 8 number of cities, for example, you choose, and you say that these are the different options that I have, and I have to make a decision out of these different options. I have to choose one option. So the step 5 is that you evaluate those alternatives. So you have till now you have chosen those alternatives, and now you have to evaluate those alternatives. So what you are going to do is that you are going to make your evaluation on the basis of the decision criteria that you have set. You are going to evaluate each alternative. So this here, it can be very lengthy and exhaustive process, the evaluation of each alternative, because you really have to gather information on each alternative basing on all those decision criteria that you have set. You have to evaluate each alternative based on all the criteria that you have set. So for this you might have to, as a manufacturing firm, you might have to take help from a search firm or from a research firm who is really engaged into, who can really collect all this information and all this data for you from the existing manufacturing companies, for example, in that area, in all those different alternative areas, or those alternative options. And the research firm is going to the manufacturing firms of those those different cities and asking them that how the government regulations are affecting them, how they have easy access to the raw materials, or how easy access they have to the other facilities which are required for doing their business, and what is the conditions of labor here, what is the price of labor here, what is the price of rentals. They might have to do this exhaustive search for, on account of all these different decision criterias. So here you collect all the necessary information, and there can be a huge amount of information that you have at this stage, and then you have to compute your optimal decision basing on all the information that you have about all the different alternative options and based on all the decision criteria that you have. So you basically, what you do is that you are here to arrive at your optimal decision, what you make a certain computations. So you multiply the rating of each criteria by the weight of that criteria. Right, so sum scores of each alternative scores that identifies your course of action that you're going to take, or the optimal decision that you're going to make. But there are certain limits to this rational decision making. We have done a few steps towards rational decision making. Of course, if a manager follows those steps, we expect that that manager will arrive at a decision that would be most rational. But in reality, the managers cannot make rational decisions because of the certain limits to their rational decision making, which we call the bounded rationality. So a decision making process restricted in the real world by limited resources, as we discussed earlier in the example of that manufacturing firm. Maybe it generates a number of alternatives, but it might not be possible for the firm to gather information on all those alternatives from all those 8 to 10 cities that it has selected that can be potential areas where it can do its business. But from all those cities, gathering all the information on all the different decision criteria, that may not be possible because of the limited resources. Of course, it needs, if it engages some other firm, it has to pay that firm, and that price might be heavy, right? And in terms of time, it might be too costly for the firm to make all these, to wait for all this information to be collected and then make the analysis on all these options. So we have the incomplete and imperfect information in reality. In reality, it's not possible to follow all this procedure of arriving at the complete information. Then the managers, they have the limited decision-making capabilities, of course, to make the analysis out of all these different criteria against all the different options that you have. That can be very laborious task, and that can stretch really the capabilities of the managers as to the rational decision-making. Then we have the gathering whole of information. It may lead to information overload that may require much longer to process, as we discussed earlier. And PC Magazine, if we again go back to the example where you have to choose a computer for the office use of your staff, if you go to the guidelines of the PC Magazine, which says that there are 24 specific decision criteria that you should use while selecting your PC, and there are approximately 50 PCs or PC options. There are 50 alternatives of which PC you can decide, and you have to arrive at the perfect PC. You need to have 50 alternative PC options, and all those options, they should be weighed against those 24 specific decision criteria. So if you make a calculation on this, it means that there are around 1200 possibilities, 1200 different options. They would be generated from these 24 decision criteria and these 50 PCs. So can you imagine that making a decision as a manager, you have to make a decision for your office use, and you are gathering information on all these 1200 different possibilities, and you're analyzing the information on all those different possibilities. So here lies the answer to this rational decision making, that how the managers, they have the bounded rationality. Of course, any manager does not have that much time to evaluate the possibilities, the options on all those 1200 different choices, and make a decision out of those only for the pieces that it has to buy for the company, right? He has hundreds of other tasks to do as well. So Other than this, the managers, they also have the memory problems. In order to make this decision on the purchase of the PC, for example, you also need to know what your existing stated is, what existing softwares that you're using in the company, and are they compatible to those new alternative options of the PCs that you have. You also need to have the information on that, and the managers, of course, they do not have that much memory to retrieve all this important information that on existing PCs, on the existing softwares that they have, are they compatible or not, which system has which software, and about all the stuff. It's not possible that the managers have that information. So the managers, they need to retrieve, they need to track that information in order to make their decision on which PC it has to choose. So for that, managers, they may need to appoint some other IT person to have a list of which systems they already have, right? Which can itself be, of course, time consuming, and it can be costly exercise, and that also there is also another limit to the rational decision making that the managers can do. Then, of course, they are not experts, as we discussed earlier, that making an interpretation of the 1200 analysis, that's not possible. That may not be possible for our manager, because after all, the manager is not that an expert in IT, or he may not have that much sharp IT skills to evaluate 1200 times the different options. So all these factors that we have discussed, they put a limit to your rational decision making, and that is why you make the decisions which are bounded, right? So they are the limits to your rationality. Then we have then we see that it means that when you have the two options, either you maximize your decision or your options or your choices, or you satisfy with them. Maximizing is choosing the best alternative, that is the rational decision making. If you follow all the steps in the rational decision making, right, then you will be making choosing an alternative that is the best alternative, and you will be maximizing your decision. And as we told that in the real world that it is not possible to do that, keeping in view a number of different limitations that the managers have. So what they do is that they satisfy their decision. So they make an option, they choose an option which is a good enough alternative or a good enough option. It is not the best option, but it is the good enough option, keeping in mind the limited resources and the limited information that the managers have, and their limited capabilities to process that information. Then we see that there are certain common decision-making mistakes, such as the intuition-based decisions. Managers, they often do make decisions that are based on their intuition, right? Such as if we take the example of Albert Einstein, who is the discoverer of law of relativity. He said that I did not arrive at the fundamental laws through my rational mind. So he is in a way saying that he did not make the rational choice or the rational decision, or he did not use rationality while arriving at the law, but it was all owing to the intuitions that he had. Then Robert Pittman, who is the CEO of Time Warner, he said that research just answers some questions. At the end of the day, it's a gut decision. So he's again referring to the decision making, to the intuitions, or to the process of the intuitions. So of course the intuitions, when you're making your decisions on the intuitions, it means that you're not really weighing all those different possibilities, you're not really analyzing your decisions, and you're not arriving at a systematic process of decision making. It means that you are basing your decision on intuitions that you have. And sometimes managers, they often make decisions which are based on intuitions, as I told you earlier, because of the expertise that they have in evaluating and in weighing all the different criteria and everything, that they just don't need to go through all the process of that rational decision making, but with their intuition they can make a decision that this would be better than this, or this would be better than this. Of course intuition has its role to play, and sometimes the managers, that the decisions made on intuition, they also work very well for the managers, but sometimes of course there is a possibility that they don't work. right? And they are of course prone to mistakes. So here I would discuss with you a case of the radiologists who were basically asked to provide their expert advice or make the diagnosis about a number of around there were 98 or 96 patients in a hospital and who had to be diagnosed for stomach cancer. So they had these radiologists, they basically had to see that whether the cells which were in their blood sample, the cells that they had to test for, whether they were benign or they were not, or they were cancerous or they were not. So they were presented these 96 patients reports and they had to check them for cancer. So these radiologists, they provided their report to all these 96 patients. So after a few months, they were again given those tests of those patients randomly, not in that order in which they were presented earlier. So the radiologists, they gave their answers which were different from the answers to which they gave previously. So because they were really when you're basing your decisions on intuitions, which are partly because managers, they feel that they're really experts, so they see something and they just decide. So it was the same with these radiologists. They were really overconfident on themselves and they were just having a look at the different samples of the different reports and making their decisions, and so all the decisions, they did not match to what they had decided earlier on the reports of all those patients. So sometimes this also happens when you're basing your decisions on intuitions. Then that is of course a decision making mistake. Then another decision making mistake that managers make is the availability bias, which is the tendency to give preference to the recent information and vivid images. And this is what normally happens. We are giving more importance to the recent information and the information that keeps getting older, that goes to our back in our minds, right? That does not remain that vivid. So here we have an example of a local channel in America. In 1990s, the security systems had really improved, and the number of the thefts and the number of frauds and the number of stealings, they had really reduced, right? But in a local TV channel, it was really advertising its security related items, and it was showing the images of the different murders and the different stealings, etc., to promote its sale of its security related items and to attract more people and to convince them to purchase the security related items. So so that led to the increase in the sales of this company, or it led to more and more people buying the security related items, although the records show that by 1990s, the number of such incidents, they had considerably fallen than they were before, but the sale of the security related items increased because of this advertisement of this local TV channel, and creating the images in the minds of the people and giving them this information that they need to buy these systems and these locks. So this is the availability bias, right? Here you're making your decisions not on the facts, but because certain images and certain information is so strong that has been created in your mind. And then you can also have the representative bias, which can another decision making mistake. Here you judge the likelihood of an event's occurrence based on its similarity to previous events. So here what you are doing is that you are making your decision based on certain previous event which is similar to the event which is occurring now. For example, if a university is making an hiring and it is hiring for a candidate who is a university has already hired a candidate who is an ABC University graduate, right? And the university is not satisfied with the performance of that university graduate, then the subsequent hirings that university would make, or the subsequent interviews it would carry, the candidates who would be coming from this ABC University, the university won't have that favorable rating of that candidate already in its mind. So this is the representative bias. The university or the manager feels that the employee that they already have from ABC University is representing the whole university, but that in actual may not be the case, right? In actual, the other candidate or the other potential candidate who's coming from an interview who might be the best candidate to be selected from, right? And then you have the anchoring and adjustment bias. This is when you use an initial value or experience as a basis of comparison throughout the decision process. So here you attach, keep a certain value, which is a certain initial value in your mind, or an initial experience in your mind, and based on that you are making your whole decision making process. So for example, when you go for an interview to a job, and when the manager asks you, or the HR professor asks you that what is the your salary expectation, and the first figure that you give as your salary expectation, that serves as an anchor to the interviewing committee. And throughout the discussion till the negotiations are arrived, all the discussion is made around, the negotiation process revolves around that one figure, right? And similarly, if you have one time traveled, or the first time if you have traveled in a business class in the airplane, all your subsequent travels in the economy class you would categorize them as your miserable trips, right? Because the one-time travel or the initial travel in the business class or in the first class, that has set a standard for you, that has become an anchor for you, and you rate your subsequent trips as miserable compared to because you're making a comparison in your mind to the first trip that you made. Then there are certain risks that are associated when you are making your decisions. Conditions of risk: when the possibility of making a wrong decision prevails, when the risky decisions they are made and they are the challenge for the manager. So there are certain rules and there are certain tests that can improve managerial decision making. These rules and these tests, they can make the managerial decision making much faster, and it can make the decision making more standard. So such as we have the decision rule. Decision rule is a set of criteria that alternative solutions must meet to be acceptable to the decision maker. So this is the I've given you an example here of the fast food restaurant. What the decision rule that normally the restaurants that are into fast food business they follow is that the food should be offered at 3 times of its cost price, right? And similarly, the decision rule that they have for the offering of the beverages or the soft drinks is that those should be offered at 4 times their cost price. And the clothing stores they follow this kind of decision rules as well. They say that the clothes that they offer, they should be 60% of their cost price, and this price at which they are offering the clothes, it should be reduced by 10% every 2 weeks, or by 20% every 2 weeks till all the cloth is sold. So these are the different decision rules that they have set, which make their decisions quicker and easier. Then we have the dictionary rule as well, which is also another guideline to improve decision making and to quick decision making. So here what is happening is that just as the words in the dictionary, they fall according to the alphabetic arrangement that they have, similarly here again you are ranking all the different options that are available to you against the decision criteria that you have set in terms of its importance. So all the alternatives will be ranked in terms of the most important criteria that you have set in your decision criteria, and then those alternatives will be chosen who are amongst the top when it comes to the fulfillment of the most important criteria of your decision making. And then those alternatives will be judged against the second most important criteria, then against the third most important criteria, and this is how you will arrive at a decision alternative that would be the best. Then you also have these minimum threshold requirements, such as a university sets the minimum threshold requirements for applications from students, that they should not have a more than 2 second divisions throughout their academic career. So this is the minimum threshold requirement. Or you need to have a master's degree for taking admission in the MPhil program. That is another minimum threshold rule that serves you and makes your decision easier, because you're already screening out some of the applicants, right? Then here I also have the example of the Ottawa rule, which says that the X-ray, because what was happening in a hospital was that the doctors, they were recommending all the cases, all the ankle injury cases, they were recommending them for X-rays. So it was although around 15% of the patients, they actually had ankle injuries, or they actually had fractures in their ankles, right? But all the cases, they were being sent for the X-rays. So this, according to Ottawa rule, what happened was that there were physicians or the doctors, they were asked to send only those patients for X-rays who have a number of conditions around their ankles that are present, such as there is swelling around the ankle area, or their ankle, they cannot stand on their ankle, they cannot bear weight on that foot in which they have the trouble, right? Or they have there is some kind of tenderness around that area. So these were the different decision different threshold requirements that the patient needs to meet to get an X-ray done. So when this rule was followed by the physicians, all the patients who were sent for X-rays, they were actually they had actually defects in their ankles, or they had actually fractured their ankles. So that results were 100%. So this is how you can, you can improve your decision making. You can arrive at faster and quicker decisions, and you can also reduce your costs. Then there are certain tests as well, such as the multivariable testing. That is a systematic approach of small-scale experiments to evaluate the possible solutions. Here, what the managers, they can do is that the number of different alternatives, they can be experimented on a small scale, and then you can arrive at a decision. For example, if an amusement park, if it sees that on Tuesdays the attendance is very lower and it is earning very lower profits, so what it can do is that it can have a number of options to solve that problem, such as offering the candidates or offering the different visitors free entrance to the park, offering the candidates free lunches to the park on Tuesdays, then offering them free parking, offering them free entry, and there can be a series of different options that it can have to attract more and more visitors on Tuesdays, right? So what it can do is that on each day it can experiment one of these different options, right, and see that what is the profitability on that day. At the end of so every day, if it tries one possibility, it can try all the 4 or 5 possibilities in 4 or 5 days, and it can then choose from the option that remained best, which gave it the park most returns on the Tuesday. So it can choose. So what you are doing is that you are practically experimenting on small scale the different options that are available to you. How can the groups improve decision making? There are a number of, again, techniques that can be used to improve the group decision making. So here we see the different advantages that the group decision making can offer you. That is here what you do is that you view problems from different perspectives. When you are into group decision making, of course the group is really diversified, a number of people coming from all the different functions, from all the different areas, from all the different backgrounds, all the different knowledge. They can provide you alternative options, alternative solutions, and alternative lines of actions, alternative ways of thinking, which can be very creative and very innovative solutions. And of course you have a number of you have much more options to make your decision from, and you can have different evaluations of your decisions, and then you can make better decisions. But there are certain disadvantages which are attached to group decision making as well, such as it is susceptible to groupthink and to considering a limited number of solutions. Then it takes considerable amount of time, of course. Having a meeting of that group, that might be very time taking. It might take a number of days before you can actually gather all the people in the group and you can have a discussion on that. And some members, they don't of course feel personally accountable when a certain decision is made as a result of that group discussion, because everyone feels that it is a group effort and nobody feels personally responsible. So that is another drawback of this group decision making. Groupthink is basically, which is one of the drawbacks of the group decision making. What is groupthink? It is that the group is insulated from others with different perspectives, and sometimes what happens is that the group leader in the group, he really takes a charge, and he, in his opening statement, he gives a strong preference for one kind of decision, as a result of which all the group members, they get influenced by that statement of the group leader. And you cannot give your right opinion, all the members, right? And sometimes the members, out of cohesiveness, to keep the cohesiveness in the among the members of the groups, even if they have some ideas or even if they have some points where they are not agreeing with the other rest of the group, they may remain quiet for the purpose of remaining cohesive and for the cohesiveness of the group overall. And then groupthink can also occur when the group members, they belong to similar backgrounds, and there is nothing different that they can say, and the discussions cannot be invited. So structured conflict is, there are two types. One is the C-type conflict, which is the cognitive conflict. It is the agreement that focuses on problem and issue-related differences of opinion. Among the group members, a conflict can arise, but the C-type conflict is, which is only related to the task itself, which is only related to the problem, it's only related to the task or to the problem, right? So on the other hand, the A-type conflict, which is affective conflict, it is basically the disagreements between the persons in the group. So they are on the personal level. C-type conflict is on the professional level. That is only related to the task, the conflict arising between the group members. A-type conflict is between the persons, and here they become personal. So as a result, the conflict is created. So of course, C-type conflict is very healthy for the group, because it can encourage more and more discussion, and it can encourage the better decision making. But A-type conflict is not good and might be harmful for the group. Then the devil's advocacy is it is another approach where to make the decisions based in groups. Here what happens is that you generate a potential solution, and then you bring that, you assign somebody in the group as devil's advocate, and he's asked to criticize the possible solution or the potential solution and ask questions about that potential solution. So this way the critic of the solution presents a number of critics to the decision maker, and based on that, that potential solution, it has to be answered, it has to be evaluated against all that critic that have been presented to the decision maker, and then it needs to be seen whether that potential decision satisfies all those critics, or there is something that needs to be changed. So it basically, falsely, the C-type conflict is basically created here, that is to flourish, and that is to enhance more and more discussion on the potential solution and to arrive at the best solution. So dialectical inquiry, that is basically what happens here is that you again generate a possible solution, and then you identify the assumptions which are underlying the potential solution. Then against that potential solution, you develop a counter proposal, and you develop another solution and another set of assumptions which is opposite to that set of assumptions that you have for your potential solution. So you have the two different advocates for each type of solution and for each type of assumptions, and they enter into debate with each other, and they challenge each other's assumptions, and they challenge each other's potential solutions. So as a result of that debate, there is a possibility that a solution that would be best would arrive at. Then we have another technique, which is the nominal group technique, which is also used to make this decision making. Here what happens is that a group reaches at the discussion place, and the members, they sit, all the members of the group sit, and all the members of the group, they write as many problems and solutions as possible. Right, they write every member is writing his own potential solution, is writing his own problem, is writing his own assumptions. After everyone has written down his own possible solution and assumptions, each member shares the idea at a time, and those ideas are written on the flip charts or on the they're posted on the wall, or they're written on the flip charts. All the ideas, but by all the members that they have written, they are written one by one on those flip charts, and they are shared with the rest of the group. Then the group discusses the advantages and disadvantages of each solution individually, and then all the group members, they are again asked to rank all the different potential solutions. They write down their own ranking, they give their own ranking, and then the members, they again after that read those rankings aloud, and the idea with the highest average rank is selected. So here this technique is basically what's happening here is that it does not of course A-type conflict is not created with this technique, but also the C-type conflict, chances are that is also not created as a result of this technique. So it is reported that this is not a very good technique to arrive at decisions. It's not a very good way of group decision making. Then we have this Delphi technique. Here what happens is that you don't meet together all the people in one room, but all the information, all the possible solutions, they are basically their opinion, the opinion of the experts that is sought on all the possible solutions to certain problems by way of open-ended questionnaires. Right, and they can be field experts, and they can be top managers in the different organizations to whom you get the information from by way of questionnaires or by way of open-ended questions, and then you gather all those feedback from all these different respondents, and then you in a second round, then you again, where there are disagreements between the different managers, you again take those disagreements to those managers again, and then you again ask your opinion from all the different managers on those issues, those areas, and you keep repeating this process unless you have arrived at a agreement between all those different experts, and you have arrived at a decision from that agreement. So this Delphi technique is basically as the process indicates, that it can be a very long-term process, it can be time-consuming process. Therefore, it's not recommended for day-to-day decision making of the managers. But this technique can be adopted for the decisions that are very critical, or that are really strategic and long-term for the organization. Then the brainstorming is another way where of this group decision making. Here of course, by brainstorming, when we are asked a number of people to come and sit together and brainstorm their ideas, so these people can also be from other groups. They can also be invited to share their ideas, so that you can come up with more and more ideas, and these ideas, they are not criticized or they are not evaluated, to flourish the sharing of ideas. Right, so this is also an approach where you can arrive at more ideas and take a decision. Then we also have this electronic brainstorming, which is to overcome the effects of the other brainstorming, because in electronic brainstorming, what happens is that you are provided with certain equipment of a certain computers to all the participants, all the group members. They have their individual computers, and here what is happening is that they are giving writing down their individual ideas on the individual computers in the electronic brainstorming. So it overcomes the production blocking that can happen in the normal manual brainstorming. There can be this production blocking, which is what happens is that when one of the members in the group is sharing an idea, and other member of the group, he also has an idea, but he has to wait for his turn, and till the time his turn comes, that idea might have gone from the mind of that group member, and so this is the production blocking of the idea, which can happen in the brainstorming, which is not done electronically. In electronically, everyone has its own computer, and as many ideas are coming into his mind, he just writes those ideas and he sends to that network computer, right? And so ideas are not lost while you have to wait for your turn to speak. Then also this electronic brainstorming, it overcomes evaluation apprehension, because when you are sitting together and you are brainstorming in a group, when you are not into electronic brainstorming, then sometimes it happens that some people, they have certain idea in their mind and they're not sharing that idea because they think that that idea might be stupid, and others may laugh on their idea. And that's what often happens with us, that we are sometimes skeptical that how would others see our idea, but that idea can be really intelligent, and it can be really a very workable and smart idea actually, right? And so that problem is overcome, because this kind of electronic brainstorming, it is normally kept anonymous, and as a result everyone is free to express what he thinks. For example, you can also write that cut the top manager's salaries or their bonuses by 50%, right? And you're writing it anonymously, and so this idea is reached to the top management and the higher authorities. There are certain disadvantages of brainstorming as well. One, it can be very expensive, of course, when you have to make such a setting in which you have to provide the computers to everyone in the group, and you have to provide the necessary software, and then no automatic acceptance of ideas because of one's position. So sometimes some managers, of course, what they want is that they don't like this idea of anonymous sharing of ideas, because they think that their name should come with the idea that has been that they are telling, that they are giving. So they want their own good name, therefore their own goodwill. They don't see this a very good idea to keep these ideas anonymous. Then some find it difficult to express themselves in writing. They are more good in their oral skills, right? And they are better express themselves in when they are speaking than when they have to write, right? So they have difficulty in this. And then some people, they may not be so good at typing. So everyone who has to participate in this electronic brainstorming needs to have this these computer skills and these typing skills. So some people who are not very good at typing or who have very poor typing skills, it might be frustrating for them to participate in this kind of exercise. So with this, we come to an end of today's lecture, where we had a discussion on what are the different steps to rational decision making, and what are the different mistakes that managers make when they are doing this decision making. What can be the different rules that can guide speedy decision making, and lastly we discussed the role of groups in this decision making process. And we also discussed their advantages and disadvantages, and we had different techniques that can be used for group decision making, and the advantages and disadvantages of those techniques. With this, we come to an end of today's lecture. I'm really thankful to you for your patient hearing. See you again. Allah Hafiz.